African girl, poses with her Arab billionaire father. They look closer at the photo and start to panic. Layla had always believed her life was a miracle. Rescued from poverty as a child, she was raised in the lap of luxury, showered with love and opportunities beyond her wildest dreams. Her father, Salim al-Rashid, one of the most powerful and influential billionaires in Dubai, had given her everything. To Layla, he wasn't just a guardian. He was her savior, the only family she had ever known. But one night, everything changed. During a high-profile charity gala, a simple photograph captured the essence of their bond, a father and daughter, smiling together under the bright flashes of cameras. But when a journalist zoomed in on the image, his face turned pale. His hands trembled as he frantically checked his phone. Moments later, Layla's picture appeared on the missing children's database. Everything she thought she knew about her life, her identity, and her father was about to crumble before her eyes. What happens when the truth you've built your life on turns into a nightmare? Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our emotional and thought-provoking stories. This one will leave you shocked, heartbroken, and questioning everything. Now, let's dive in. The evening was dazzling. A grand charity gala filled with the richest and most influential people in Dubai glittered under the chandelier lights of the Al Rashid estate. Journalists, photographers, and guests roamed the venue, sipping on golden champagne, discussing billion-dollar deals, and admiring the extravagant displays of wealth. Layla al-Rashid stood beside her father, smiling gracefully as the cameras flashed. She was used to these events. After all, she had grown up in a world of privilege, where socializing with the elite was second nature. Her father, Salim al-Rashid, stood tall beside her, a man of immense power and respect, known for his ironclad business empire and his generosity towards the less fortunate. He adored Layla. Anyone who saw them together could feel the warmth between them, father and daughter, an unbreakable bond. "Smile, my princess," Salim whispered as a photographer raised his camera. Layla tilted her chin up, the picture-perfect daughter of an Arab billionaire. The flash went off, capturing the moment forever. But fate had other plans. As the gala continued, a journalist from an international news agency scrolled through his camera roll, reviewing the shots he had just taken. Suddenly, his heart skipped a beat. His fingers trembled as he zoomed in on Layla's face. His breath hitched. He knew that face. A cold sweat formed on his forehead as he quickly unlocked his phone and searched through an online database. It only took seconds for the truth to hit him like a punch to the stomach. Layla's face matched the image of a missing child. A name flashed on his screen: Amina Diallo. His hands shook as he compared the photos. The girl in the missing child database was younger, skinnier, with shorter hair, But there was no doubt. It was her. The same deep brown eyes, the same delicate features. The resemblance was undeniable. His heart pounded as he whispered, "Oh my God." Without hesitation, he turned to his colleague. "You need to see this," he muttered, showing him the side-by-side images. The other journalist gasped. "That's impossible. Salim al-Rashid's daughter? A missing child." But there was no denying it. The evidence was right in front of them. Determined to get answers, the journalist moved towards the al-Rashid family's table. He knew this story would shake the world. Across the room, Layla laughed softly at something her father had said. She had no idea that her entire life was about to collapse in the span of a single moment. The journalist stopped beside the table, his presence demanding attention. Salim, always a man in control, looked up with a polite but firm expression. "Mr. al-Rashid," the journalist began, his voice careful, "I need to speak with you privately. It's important." Salim's brows furrowed. "I'm in the middle of a dinner with my daughter. If it's about business, contact my office." "It's not about business." The journalist's voice was sharp now. He glanced at Layla, his expression unreadable. "It's about her." Layla stiffened. "Me?" Salim's entire posture changed. His grip on his glass tightened slightly, his jaw clenched for a brief second before he masked his emotions. "I don't know what you're implying," he said, his tone calm but cold. The journalist hesitated for a second before taking out his phone. He tapped a few times, then turned the screen towards them. Layla leaned forward, her curiosity turning into confusion. On the screen was an old missing child poster, her own face staring back at her. Her breath caught in her throat. Her heart started to race. "That's not possible," she whispered. Salim reached for the phone, his fingers slightly trembling. He stared at the image, his usually composed expression flickering with something deep and dark. The journalist pressed forward. "Her name is Amina Diallo. She disappeared from her village in West Africa when she was 4 years old. Her family has been searching for her ever since." Layla's head spun. This had to be a mistake. "I don't remember any of this," she muttered, shaking her head, but something inside her, something buried deep in her subconscious, began to stir. A faint memory, a voice calling her name, a distant sound of crying. Salim's face was unreadable now. "Enough," he said sharply, standing up. "This conversation is over." Layla looked up at him, her heart hammering against her chest. "Father, is this true?" Salim met her eyes, and for the first time in her life, she saw something she had never seen in him before. Fear. She stood up, her legs unsteady. Her world was tilting sideways. I need answers, she whispered. Salim exhaled deeply, his shoulders dropping. His mask was crumbling. He looked at his daughter, the girl he had raised, the child he had loved more than anything in the world, and for the first time, he had no words to save himself. Layla's breath came in short, uneven gasps as she stared at the missing child poster on the journalist's phone. Her own face, or at least a younger version of it, stared back at her, haunting and unfamiliar. The name beneath it read, Amina Diallo. No, this had to be a mistake. I don't understand, she whispered, her voice barely audible. This can't be real. But deep inside, something shifted. A cold, creeping sensation clawed at the edges of her mind, like an old memory trying to resurface from the depths of oblivion. Salim, her father, the man who had always been her rock, remained silent. His expression was unreadable, but his body was tense. It was as if the air around them had thickened, suffocating and heavy with the weight of something unspoken. The journalist's eyes darted between them, sensing the tension. Mr. Al-Rashid, I think you owe your daughter an explanation. Salim's jaw tightened. I owe her nothing, he said coldly, slipping seamlessly into the commanding tone that had made him one of the most feared businessmen in the world. This conversation is over. He reached for Layla's arm, his grip firm but not forceful. We're leaving. But Layla pulled away. No. Salim's head snapped toward her, his dark eyes narrowing. He hadn't expected resistance. Layla. His voice was lower now, almost pleading. Not here. His reaction sent a chill down her spine. She had never seen him like this, not composed, not in control. He wasn't outright denying it. He wasn't reassuring her, telling her the journalist was lying. Instead, he wanted to leave, to escape. Her stomach twisted. Tell me the truth, she said, her voice shaking. Why is my picture on that poster? The journalist, emboldened by her reaction, pushed further. Layla, your real family has been looking for you for almost 2 decades. They never stopped searching. She swallowed hard. My real family. Her voice cracked on the last word. It felt foreign on her tongue, like something out of a stranger's life. She turned to Salim again, her chest heaving. Say something. Tell me this is a mistake. His lips parted, but no words came out. And that was when Layla felt something inside her shatter. The journalists were staring now. Guests at the gala were whispering, sensing the rising tension between the billionaire and his daughter. Layla's world was collapsing in real time. She turned on her heel and ran. Layla barely remembered how she made it back to the car. The pounding in her chest was deafening, her breaths uneven, as she tried to process what had just happened. Salim followed close behind, instructing the driver to take them home. The entire ride was silent. She stared out the window, watching the blurred city lights, her reflection barely visible against the glass. Her own face, the same face she had just seen on that poster. Salim had never spoken much about her early childhood. Whenever she had asked, he would say things like, "You were so young. It doesn't matter now." Or, "All that matters is that you're safe, that I gave you a life you deserve." And she had believed him. She had never questioned it. Now, she was questioning everything. The moment they stepped into the mansion, Layla turned to face him. "No more running," she said, her voice cold. "Tell me the truth." Salim sighed deeply, running a hand through his graying hair. He looked exhausted. "I didn't want you to find out like this," he muttered. "Then how was I supposed to find out?" she snapped. "When were you planning to tell me that my entire life is a lie?" Salim's face twisted with something she couldn't quite define. Pain, regret, fear. He walked over to his office, gesturing for her to follow. Layla hesitated before stepping inside. The room smelled of old books and expensive leather, a place she had been in countless times as a child. But tonight, it felt foreign. Salim opened a drawer and pulled out an old, weathered envelope. He hesitated for a second before handing it to her. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a photo. A younger version of herself, no older than 4, standing in a dusty village street. She was thin, barefoot, clutching a small stuffed toy. Her expression was solemn, her eyes too big for her face. Layla's throat closed. She didn't remember this. She looked up at him, horror creeping up her spine. "What is this?" Salim exhaled. "The day I first saw you." Her fingers tightened around the edges of the photo. The truth was right in front of her, and yet she wasn't ready to face it. "Where?" Her voice was hoarse. "West Africa," he admitted. Her knees nearly gave out. The realization hit her like a truck. The missing child poster. Her name, Amina Diallo. You took me," she whispered, stepping back as if she had been burned. "You bought me." Salim's face crumbled. "Layla, it wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" She cut him off, her voice rising. "You told me I was safe. You told me I was yours. And now I find out my family has been searching for me all these years." Tears burned in her eyes. Her body shook with anger, betrayal, grief. Salim swallowed hard, his own eyes glistening. "I gave you a better life. You have to understand. I saved you. Saved me." She let out a hollow laugh, stepping further away from him. "Or stole me?" The silence between them was unbearable. For the first time in her life, Layla didn't know who she was anymore. And she didn't know if she would ever forgive him. Layla felt like the ground beneath her was cracking, threatening to swallow her whole. The office, once a place of comfort, now felt like the scene of a crime. The air was thick with tension, suffocating, pressing down on her chest like an unbearable weight. She gripped the old photograph tightly, her fingers trembling over the faded edges. The little girl in the picture, her younger self, stared back at her with empty eyes. This was real. This was proof. She wasn't Layla al-Rashid. She was Amina Diallo. She had a past, a family, a real family, one that had been searching for her all these years. And the man standing in front of her, the father she had loved with all her heart, was the reason she had never found them. The betrayal burned inside her. "How long were you planning to keep this from me?" she asked, her voice shaking. Salim's shoulders were tense. He looked smaller now, older, as if carrying the weight of his own guilt had finally caught up to him. "I wanted to tell you," he said quietly, "but you were just a child. What good would it have done? All you knew was this life, a life I built to protect you." She let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. "Protect me?" Her voice cracked with anger. "You didn't protect me. You stole me. You took me from my real family. People who loved me, who never stopped looking for me." Salim's face twisted in pain. "You think they would have found you? Do you know what happens to children in places like that?" His voice was laced with a desperate edge. "You were alone. You were going to die." Layla's stomach turned. "So what? That gave you the right to take me, to buy me like I was some kind of possession?" Salim took a deep breath, running a hand over his face. "It wasn't like that." "Then tell me what it was like," she shouted. "Because from where I'm standing, I was kidnapped, and my entire life has been a lie." He didn't speak. He couldn't. Layla took a shaky breath, trying to keep herself from falling apart. "How did you get me?" Salim hesitated. His silence was enough to confirm what she already knew. The truth was ugly. Finally, he spoke, his voice hollow. "You were in a market. A group of men. They were selling children. I was there on business. I saw you. You were weak, starving." He swallowed hard. "I knew what would happen if I left you there." Layla's chest tightened. "So you bought me." Salim flinched at the words. She thought of all the times he had told her she was his greatest blessing. How he had held her when she cried as a child, how he had whispered that she would always be safe. But none of it had been real. Tears burned at the corners of her eyes. "You never even tried to find my real family, did you?" Salim lowered his gaze. That was her answer. A sob escaped her lips, and she turned away, her mind spinning. Her entire existence had been rewritten by one man's decision. Her father, the man she had loved and trusted above all else, had been lying to her for her entire life. "I need to leave," she whispered. Salim's head snapped up. "Layla." "No," she cut him off. "I'm not Layla. Not anymore. His face crumpled. She pushed past him, rushing out of the office, out of the house that had once felt like home, but now felt like a prison. Her hands shook as she grabbed her phone, scrolling through the article the journalist had shown her. The missing child poster was still there, staring back at her like a ghost from another life. At the bottom, there was a number, a contact for her real family. Her fingers hovered over the screen. Could she really do this? She glanced back at the mansion, the place she had spent her entire life. Leaving meant losing everything. But staying meant living a lie. Taking a deep breath, she pressed the call button. The phone rang. Once, twice, and then a voice, a woman's voice, filled with disbelief and cautious hope. Hello? Layla's throat tightened. She opened her mouth, but the words wouldn't come out. Could she say it? Could she shatter both of their worlds with just a few words? She took a shaky breath. I think I'm your daughter. The silence that followed was deafening. And then the woman on the other end broke down into uncontrollable sobs. Layla felt her own tears fall freely, her body trembling as the weight of everything came crashing down on her. Somewhere in the mansion behind her, Salim al-Rashid sat alone, staring at the door she had just walked out of. For the first time in years, he felt something he had never allowed himself to feel. Helpless. And for the first time since she had been a child, Layla felt something new, something terrifying. Uncertain about where she truly belonged, Layla stood frozen, her phone pressed against her ear, her entire body trembling. The sobs on the other end of the line sent a shock wave through her chest. Who is this? The woman's voice cracked, filled with disbelief, fear, and something else. Hope. Layla's throat tightened. Saying the words felt impossible, as if speaking them aloud would make everything more real. She swallowed hard. My name is... I think my name was... Amina. Amina Diallo. The crying on the other end grew louder. The woman gasped, as if the air had been stolen from her lungs. Oh my God, she whispered. Amina, is it really you? Layla squeezed her eyes shut. She didn't know. She didn't know who she was anymore. She had been Layla al-Rashid for so long, raised as the daughter of a billionaire, believing she had been saved from an unknown past. Now, she wasn't sure if she had ever been saved at all. She heard another voice in the background, a man's voice, urgent, desperate. Who is it? Who's on the phone? Then the woman's voice again, frantic and breathless. It's her. It's Amina. A choked sob escaped Layla's lips. These were her parents, her real parents, the ones who had been looking for her for nearly 20 years. She could hear the man take the phone now. His voice was shaking. Amina, my daughter, is it really you? Layla's legs gave out. She sank to the floor, gripping the phone like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. "I don't know," she whispered. "I don't know who I am anymore." Inside the Al-Rashid mansion, Salim sat at his desk, his hands clasped together tightly. His mind was racing, his heart aching in a way he had never felt before. He had known this day would come. From the moment he had taken her from that market, a starving, terrified child, he had known deep down that one day the past would come knocking. He had convinced himself that it didn't matter, that he was giving her a better life, one she never could have had if she had stayed in that village. But now, he wasn't so sure, because now he had lost her. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hall, and suddenly there she was. Layla stood at the entrance of his office, her eyes red, her expression unreadable. Salim slowly rose from his chair, his throat dry. "Layla." She flinched. It was the smallest reaction, but it destroyed him. She wasn't his Layla anymore. "I talked to them," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "My real family." Salim felt something crack inside his chest. "They want to see me," she continued, wrapping her arms around herself as if trying to keep herself from breaking. "They never stopped looking. They thought I was dead." Salim's breathing was shallow. "Layla, why didn't you try to find them?" Her voice rose, her pain slipping through the cracks. "Why did you never even give me the chance to know them?" Salim closed his eyes for a brief moment before looking at her again. "Because I was afraid." She let out a hollow laugh. "Afraid of what? Of losing me?" His expression darkened. "No." Silence. Then he told her the truth. "I was afraid of what they would tell you." Layla's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean?" Salim exhaled, running a hand over his face. "There's something I never told you. Something that—" The sound of tires screeching outside cut him off. Layla turned toward the window just as bright headlights flashed through the darkness. A car, no, several cars. Salim's entire body went rigid. He didn't have to ask who they were. They had come for her. Layla's real family was here. Her world, which had already been torn apart, was about to change forever. And Salim al-Rashid was about to face the worst moment of his life. Layla stood frozen in her place, staring at the people in front of her. The woman who had carried her, the man who had fought to find her, her real parents. Her mother sobbed, holding on to her like she was afraid to let go. Her father's hands trembled as he touched her face, as if making sure she was truly there. "My baby," he choked out, voice breaking. "My Amina." Layla's chest tightened. Amina. That name, foreign yet familiar, crashed over her like a tidal wave. She should have felt complete. She should have felt like she was coming home. But why did she feel like she was breaking apart? Behind her, Salim stood silently, his face unreadable, his world crumbling before his eyes. His daughter, his Layla, was slipping away, and this time he had no power to stop it. Layla pulled away slightly, looking into the faces of the people who had spent almost 2 decades searching for her. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. Her mother cupped her face gently, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You don't have to, my love. We will take it one step at a time." A step. That's all it took. A step toward them meant walking away from everything else. She turned back slightly, locking eyes with Salim. His expression was carefully composed, but she could see the pain beneath it, the silent devastation. He had raised her, he had loved her, but he had also lied. And now she had to decide if she could forgive him. Salim swallowed hard, his voice low, broken. "This is what's right," he said, though it sounded like a death sentence. "Go." Layla's breath hitched. He wasn't fighting for her. He was letting her go. She felt tears fall before she even realized she was crying. For so long, she had been Layla al-Rashid. Now, she wasn't sure who she was at all. With one last glance at the only father she had ever known, she turned away. She took that step. And Salim watched, his chest caving in, as the daughter he had stolen, the daughter he had loved, walked away from him forever. The moment she disappeared into the car, Salim staggered back inside, his vision blurred with unshed tears. The mansion felt emptier than ever before. He walked through the halls, past the pictures of their life together, past the bedroom she would never return to. He sat down at his desk, the same place he had once made the decision to take her. And for the first time in his life, Salim al-Rashid broke. Tears streamed down his face, his body shaking with sobs he could no longer suppress, because he had finally lost her. And this time, there was no way to get her back.